Welcome to the Braveyard. Today's guest is very special. He is a former professional hockey player and was the first professional hockey player to come out as gay. He is leading the fight against homophobia in the sports industry, and his continuous work to shift the conversation around sports and the LGBTQ community has earned him recognition as one of the Hockey News 100 most influential people in hockey for 2022. He speaks internationally and just finished an educational tour across Canada. He has a digital series and a BA in communication and sports communication. So please help me welcome the one and only Brock McGillis. Hi, Brock. How are you?
Hi, I'm really good. How are you?
I'm good. We were just discussing, but it's very fair to say that you have just had an insane couple of months. Do you mind just sharing a little bit about what you're doing and why these months were so crazy? Because it's astounding to me what you just pulled off.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a wild 3 months. I just did a tour across Canada where I went to 100 minor hockey teams in 100 days to talk about inclusion and language and supporting one another and breaking conformity and anti-bullying and you name it, we probably touched on it, but it was a daunting task. We hit every NHL market in Canada. So it was 7 stops in 3 months and 100 teams in 100 days.
Wow, that's insane.
Yeah, it was a
I
lot.
guess you got to see a lot of Canada, which is nice, but you also did it in the winter, which seems like,
Yep. Here's the thing. So I started in Vancouver and I wish we knew each other, then we could have hung out. I started in Vancouver in November and I was there for 18 days and it only rained once. We had sun the entire time, which is unheard of, right?
I think it just rained for like 2 months straight. This is the first sunny day we've had, so maybe you just bring the sun.
I bring it. So then Calgary in December, and like climate change is bad, and I know that, but I was kind of grateful for it in the moment. 'Cause we went to Calgary and it was like between 10 and 15 degrees in December.
Oh,
The entire time
wow.
we were there. I know. And then Edmonton was
Isn't
like
there a name for that though in car? Isn't it Chinook?
Chinook.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
But I feel like this was less Chinook and more climate change because it like wasn't a day, it was like a week and a half.
Fair.
And then Edmonton was like +5. Winnipeg was
Wow.
only -2. The only place we had snow was Montreal. Like it's been pretty incredible. Like I've been very fortunate in terms of weather. Although now in Toronto, it's gloomy every day and it's kind of like Vancouver weather. It's really strange.
Weird. I just feel like Vancouver weather is always so chaotic. Like we'll have snow in the morning and then it'll be like super sunny in like spring and then it'll be a hailstorm and then you just kind of have to like walk outside and dress however you want to and just hope for the best because there's no way to tell what the fuck our weather's going to do here.
But what I appreciate about Vancouver, it's kind of like the UK where people will go outside regardless.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we don't care. Like our patio season is all year round. People just sit outside in the pouring rain.
Everyone's fucking soft in Toronto. Like there's one, snowflake and they're like bundled up and you won't see them for a month. And like
You guys know how to drive in the snow though. Like my family's from back east, so I spent a lot of time back east. But I will say the one thing that drives me insane is if we even see a snowflake, like if you smell a snowflake, the whole city shuts down. Nobody can drive. All of the highways are fucked. Like we don't have any setup. Nobody salts the roads. Nobody plows. Like we could have snow in the forecast for 2 months and the city will do nothing.
and nobody probably has snow tires either.
No, no, not a
Yeah.
single person. I do because have like a big SUV and I like to drive up and go see friends when I can in the winter when the Coquihalla is not like awful. But yeah, the city doesn't have snow tires. We're not, it's like if it snowed in LA, like that one time LA got like that big snow last year. It's just hilarious watching everything completely shut down and people freeze up.
So last week in LA, it was raining and it wasn't even like a crazy rainstorm, and they shut down all the high schools and stuff. It's pretty
I
wild,
mean, if you were a kid looking at the TV, waiting, being like, oh my God, am I gonna get like a rain day? And like,
right? Like
it's an
imagine,
LA thing.
I grew up in northern Ontario. Like I'm from Sudbury.
Yeah.
So like we get like we had snowbanks like 8 feet high and you're still going to school. Like there was no, unless it was like freezing rain and snow, they weren't shutting down the school. So I
Totally. My cousins never got snow days. They were in like Orangeville,
yeah.
Burlington, Oakville. Like they would never get a snow day. I would have like maybe an inch of snow and be like, woohoo, snow
Yeah, it's
day.
like 10 flakes outside, but I swear that's downtown Toronto now. Like everyone is like not leaving their condo as soon as a flake of snow hits or it rains even a little bit.
Yeah, see, we're pretty like we'll go out, we'll hit up the patio. There's a video somewhere of people sitting out on the patio in torrential downpour and these servers like trying to pour wine. And I was just like, that is Vancouver in a nutshell. It's hilarious. I worked in the restaurant industry for like 20 years, so you just kind of get used to that. But yeah, it is weird, I guess. We're
No,
outdoorsy people in the West.
I love it. Same, the UK is the same way, and
Mhm.
very similar
Well,
weather,
and it's pub culture in the UK. Like nothing's gonna stop them from going and getting their pint.
right?
So let's talk a little bit about this tour and what was involved here, because I think it's something that's so extraordinary. It's something that's so important that's happening, and a lot more people should know about what you're doing and partake if they can in their own way or creating conversation and supporting their children. But when we look at sports in general, it is still a very homophobic, transphobic culture. Before this interview, it was funny. I looked at the Canucks had a Pride Night post that they did. And I just went on. I don't normally go on to like read what those comments are because I know that there's a ton of negative ones and I just try to not pay as much attention and take it on. But because of this interview, I went and I read down a bunch of them and it's so negative. It's queer conversation has no place in sports. Like, do what you want, but just shut up about it, blah, blah, blah. And you see the people that are trying to support, but I think it's incredibly important to see sports teams supporting queer community. And when we look at talking about like queer players that are within the industry or youth that are growing up and going into sports, I think that it's pretty wild that that culture is still so extreme. What's your point of view on how we create a safer environment for kids playing sports that might be queer?
So I think it's wild. Like, I just find it so funny that people are like, this has no place in sport. Meanwhile, there's kiss cams at every sporting event where
Totally.
actual people are kissing. There's features on spouses of players all the time.
Hmm.
Taylor Swift probably got as much visibility during the Super Bowl as, any of the players. So like, but so heterosexuality is okay,
Yeah.
but homosexuality is abhorrent.
Yeah.
Like it's an abomination to them. And I'm just like if you're consistent and you're like, hey, I don't want to see heterosexuality in sports, I don't want to see homosexuality, I don't want to see anything but sports, I'll respect that
Hmm.
because at least you're consistent.
Yeah.
But this is hypocritical.
Yeah.
Um, I think sport, especially men's team sport, I think we're in different places in men's sport versus women's sport. I think women's sport has been welcoming to queer women, especially lesbians and bi women, but not, I think we're at a point where the conversation is around trans women in sport.
Hmm.
So that's like, I feel like they're like 5 steps ahead of where we're at in the men's side,
Hmm.
where we're still talking about gay men being able to play sports, and
Hmm.
we haven't progressed to the point where we're like, hey, trans folks, like let's have, it's just so far behind. And I think in my opinion, it has to do with I think the male gaze plays a big part in it, in the sense that I think a lot of players are concerned that they'll be objectified by a gay man the same way that they potentially objectify women. So they're concerned about being naked in the locker room with a gay teammate. What they fail to realize, though, is that locker room's like a family.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever I get asked a question, well, what if a teammate checks me out? And I get asked this by NHL players and minor hockey players. Um, I'll say like, well, do you check your sister out in the shower?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're a family, that's like a brotherhood in there. They're
Mm-hmm.
not checking you out, you know. In terms of how we get it to be a
And
safe.
honestly, I mean, sorry, but like,
No, go
who
ahead.
fucking cares? Like, if another human being is, glancing to appreciate the fact that you're an attractive person, take it as a compliment and move the fuck on. Like, if some girl's walking past you on the street and she's got a small dress on, great boobs, and a great butt, I can guarantee that you're probably going to give her a quick up and down with the eyes. It's not like you're, you know, it, there's
Well,
nothing. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
no, but I just to your point, like I remember one time I brought a hockey player and his girlfriend went to see a drag show, so I brought them to a gay bar, and
Hmm.
he was like late teens, early 20s, and he was like shaking
Hmm.
going in, and he's like, "Why do I feel this way?" I'm like, "Well, it's called homophobia. Like, like it's just
Hmm.
like it's not overt, like you don't hate gay people, but you're afraid to be hit on." And
Hmm.
I said, the way you're feeling right now and the concern you have, which likely won't even happen,
Hmm.
because people are going to be respectful of you, but your girlfriend has to deal with that every time she leaves the house.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
welcome to the girls' world.
you know what I mean? And he's like, oh, I never thought about that. Um, but and I'll tell players, I'll be like, if you're going on vacation with your wife or girlfriend and your teammates and you're on a beach and your wife's in like a G-string bikini, there's a higher probability of your teammates, your buddies, checking out and fantasizing about your girlfriend or wife than your gay teammate fantasizing about you.
Oh, 100%.
The other thing too is that gay teammate knows all the dirty shit they do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they know all the disgusting stuff they do all the time. So like that it's just not reality. But I think besides that, the other thing we have to change is the language.
Hmm.
I think players in men's team sports put each other down by feminizing one another,
Hmm.
saying like homo negative language. And
Totally.
it's essentially saying that a gay man or a woman is less than a straight cis man.
Totally. Well,
And
and that's how, I mean, the trans conversation in sports right now, that's very similar. Like the reason trans women are in such a hot seat and trans masculine people aren't is because they are viewing trans women in derogatory ways and saying that they're better than cis women, again, because it's going along the stereotype of men are better than women. So if you were born biologically male at birth, then that means that you're better than all of these cis women in sports. So therefore you shouldn't play. But trans mass people aren't on such a hot seat at the moment because they're viewed now as assigned female at birth playing against cis men. And it's that derogatory sense again that in whatever misogynistic or transphobic way they want to be saying it, they're saying women are less than men and trans women are not women and trans men are not men, which therefore means trans mass people can play with men because they're at a disadvantage and trans feminine people shouldn't be playing with women because they're at an advantage.
it's such a crock of shit, like the science behind it
Such a crock of shit.
just
Totally.
disproves that. Like they fail to realize that if you're born male, you have a heavier skeletal system than being born female. And when you transition and you're put through hormone therapy and to play professional sports or NCAA, like high levels, you have to go through rigorous hormone therapy
Mm-hmm.
and you stop producing testosterone.
Mm-hmm.
So you lose all the muscle mass you ever had. And now your body is being policed more so than even a cisgender women, which cis women's bodies are being policed in sport and nobody's talking about it. And it needs to be a bigger conversation because men's bodies aren't being policed in sport. And but with trans women, if you're not producing testosterone, you've lost all your muscle mass and you have a heavier skeletal system, you're actually at a disadvantage.
Hmm.
And I'll say to people, I'm like, well, name me an athlete that's dominating women's sport, a trans athlete.
Totally.
And they're
And it
like,
always comes back to the same conversation, which, right now is basically around women's swimming, which
there's one. And she dominated for 1 year.
for
And
and she failed majority of other competitions within that same category, but nobody's talking about all the times that she lost and came in like 18th, 23rd place. But the one time she comes in first, that's a massive conversation. So,
there was a high school sprinter who this girl sued a trans girl for beating her in a race. And that was the whole headline. Trans girl beats cis girl in race and gets sued. Like the headlines everywhere. What it failed to mention, and these are sensationalized and it's part of the problem, but what it failed to mention was that the trans girl ended like seventh or something, and the cis girl ended like 12th. So there were six cis girls that ended ahead of the trans girl in the race. And like what are we talking about here? And even
wild.
the protests, and I'm sure we'll get into it's all ridiculous. But I think the first step is evolving the language. And I try and humanize through my lived experience
Mm,
how language, behaviors, attitudes impacted me. And I was somebody who was able, like, I'm a masculine presenting gay guy who's white, cis, and played a professional sport. Like, I have a ton of privilege. So I wasn't bullied for my sexuality. Nobody knew. I was able to hide and conform. And yet, hearing that homo negative language on a daily basis made me self harm and want to die.
mhm,
It killed my career. And I drank heavily. I was struggling immensely. Nobody knew. And so I try and share that and the impact and then teach them how they can create shifts themselves and how they could be shift makers. And those shifts could be for anything. Pick the topic: racism, homophobia, misogyny, ableism, mental health, bullying. It doesn't matter what it is. We can all create shifts, and the shifts have a ripple effect and will have a greater impact than they'll ever realize. And then I go through ways to create the shifts. But I think, the main thing to me is the language, the behaviors, the attitudes in the space have been normalized for so long.
mhm.
That's what needs to evolve.
I couldn't agree more. When my management team came to me with this conversation and having you on to talk about sports and what you're doing in sports, I did have to take a minute to be like, this is a conversation that I've kept myself out of for the most part because it is so hot and heavy with queer people and sports, specifically trans people in sports right now, which is I think why I've tried to like pick and choose where I'm coming into the conversation. A, because I don't play sports. B, because I'm pretty fucking uneducated when it comes to the regulations and the things that queer people need to go through in order to compete. And B, because I just honestly, I stand up and advocate as much as I can. But right now in this world, you have to pick and choose because if you're advocating on every avenue, it's exhausting. But
And you have to protect your peace too. Like,
totally.
at some point, it has to be on other people to step up.
Totally. But that's what this podcast is focused around is having these conversations. And I think that had I not had you on and had this conversation, I would have been doing myself and all of the listeners a disservice because this is one of the most important conversations surrounding queer people and queer youth right now, because this is something that is a part of all of our lives in youth. Like all of us, for the most part, play a sport in some form or another, whether it's like elementary school, high school, or taking it more professionally into college and making it a career focus. But everyone has an experience playing sport. It's where we learn so many core elements around foundational team building and working together and creating trust within your team and the community that you're building, I learned so much. I loved playing sports. And I think it's really, really important that we have conversations like this right now. Maybe not me going and advocating for trans feminine professional sports players because I can't really contribute to that conversation, but I can contribute to the conversation about being youth and playing sports and the fact that everybody should be able to and everyone has a place because it's important fundamental things for kids to be able to have. And that's just the end of it.
Yeah, I look at it like this. Like for so many people, and I'm just gonna use hockey as an example, it doesn't matter what sport it is, but when they enter the rink and the locker room, it becomes all their problems, whether it's a kid or an adult, they see their friends, all their problems disappear. It doesn't matter if it's like a kid, school, parents, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever it is, that disappears. You're just in there with your friends, you're immersed in the moment, you're kind of grounded because you're in the moment. And then you get on the ice or the court or the field, and you're just so immersed in it that it's all you're thinking about. Every problem in your life disappears.
Mhm.
For queer folks, entering that locker room reinforces all the oppression you experience in society because of the language, behaviors, and attitudes. So it's compounding what you're already dealing with and kind of has like a snowball effect where it just continues to grow and impact you. So for me, like I love sports. I play a ton of sports. I love it, but I hated entering the locker room because that's where everything I'm struggling with would be reinforced.
Right.
So you're trying to compete at an elite level in a sport, but you're sitting there for 2 hours before you're going on the ice and you're being reminded of how much you're probably hated and, how society views you.
Hmm.
And it was, and honestly, I don't believe that most of them actually feel the way that I don't think their thoughts and behaviors match. I don't think their thoughts match their language and actions.
Totally. Yeah.
And I think it's so riddled with conformity. It's so insular of an environment. They dress the same, they talk the same, they walk the same, and it's been programmed from adults who came from the sport and are reinforcing and perpetuating norms that they learned, and it's just a vicious cycle.
Hmm.
So, but regardless of the reason why they're doing it, it's still happening
Hmm.
and it's still impacting people. And then queer kids quit. Like I wouldn't put a queer kid in men's team sports right now.
Hmm.
I would feel very uncomfortable if I had a child putting them in because I'd be afraid for their well-being.
Yeah.
And that makes me sad because you look at our, self-harm rates, suicide rates, the amount of struggle we have, the oppression, the look at, even unhoused youth in Canada, over 40% are LGBTQ plus.
Hmm.
And you look at all these things and go, like, sport could be that empowerment tool to feel good,
Hmm.
to, help. So maybe it distracts you for a few hours and then that physical release and everything else. Maybe you don't think about self-harming that day.
Hmm.
So, like, people worried about genitals or this or that, it's like there's bigger fucking things in life.
Yeah.
And, like, yeah, you get to a point where there's money involved in different things. Sure, there needs to be regulations and guidelines, and there are. And they seem to think, like, people seem to think that, like, I can declare myself as trans and then play women's professional hockey tomorrow. It's not the way that works. And,
Hmm.
so whether it's trans people in women's sport or gay men and bi men in men's sport, there's, it could be such an incredible space to feel good, but it currently is an oppressive space.
And I've never really thought about the difference when we're looking at men's sports versus women's and just the acceptance of um openly gay players. You look at the women's US soccer team, if the US men's soccer team had as many openly queer players and let's say some more feminine presenting players on that team, it would be very different than how the women's team is received right now. And I don't know if that's because, again, there's this misogynistic logic of lesbians are okay, that's hot, it's two girls, but gay men, that's gross. I don't know if that's part of what's just like ingrained into people's perception of watching queer people, but it is wild to think that women's sports is fairly openly queer. Like there's a lot of gay women that play sports. Most of my lesbian friends are great at sports. It's not necessarily a stereotype. They're just fantastic fucking women and they love to dominate in sports. But if gay men were doing that, it would be received very differently.
Only people used to call me a lesbian, a gay lesbian, because I play sports. I, I- um, yeah, I think it's all rooted in the
Mm.
patriarchy.
Yeah.
Twofold. Number one, sport is seen as masculine.
Hmm.
If you're a woman who plays sports, you must be a lesbian because the stereotypical lesbian is more masculine than a cis woman, like or the
Hmm.
straight cis woman. And it's like, well, that's a crock of shit.
Hmm.
So you see now a lot of women are hyper feminizing themselves in sport so that they can keep their feminine identity and not be perceived as, butch.
Hmm.
And then on top of that, to your point, like men for the longest time ran women's sport. And
Hmm.
the idea of two women together is hot to men. So it's a fantasy. So the notion of two women together is okay, and then but the idea of a gay man in the locker room, going back to that male gaze thing, they think they're gonna sexualize them because that's the way they look at women.
Right.
And it's so messed up and deeply rooted that they don't even realize. But yeah, it's the reality and it's a shame on both fronts. Like you shouldn't be stereotyped as a lesbian because you play sport. And if you're a lesbian, you shouldn't have to be butch or femme or anything else. Like you could be whoever you want to be and play sport. And
Hmm.
on the men's side, like if you're a femme presenting gay guy, good luck.
I mean, it is good luck. It's just like cool. You're gonna go up against every possible scenario of discrimination in your career. Like there's
Yeah,
just
they quit. They just leave sport.
I mean, why would you stay in it though? Like if I was a queer man trying to go through a hockey career, I honestly like I just don't think the toll on your mental health would be worth it.
If you had it's like anything else. If you had a job and your coworkers, your colleagues are calling you slurs every day or using slurs that are derogatory towards your community, whether they're, directed at you or not every day, and then your boss, your coach is using them too, and
Hmm.
around you you're like, I'm probably hated in this workplace and I should find a new job.
Hmm.
It's the same thing. And what's sad is it's happening as children and they're leaving young. And it's like it's not even a job then. It's supposed to be just fun enjoyment, like
Totally.
sport is a kid's game. And
Yeah.
it's like yet we're pushing out so many kids and like you look at Gen Z is identifying as not straight at 25% and LGBTQ plus at like 20 or so. And it's like you're pushing out almost 25% of the population from playing.
Hmm.
It's pretty wild.
And I think that there's so many things in sport that are just they're fucked up right now, and we need to have an evolution happen within sports and that industry in general because it's outdated, misogynistic bullshit at this point, and it needs to be updated and revamped. But nobody's really willing to like take the lead on that. But when you look at there's this conversation of like if we're educating, we're grooming children to this, like the statistics of the number of kids that are identifying as queer It's not because people are being groomed. It's because we finally have representation. We finally have language. We finally have a conversation where it's not taking kids 40 plus years to come out. When we look at what the population was a decade or 2 decades or 3 decades ago, when people were coming out later in life, there's a lot of people that go through life when we're looking born in 1950, they didn't come out until they had more language, they felt safer. So some of these people are coming out in their 60s or 70s, and a lot of people within that generation would have passed on before that point. So we're looking at statistics that are skewed. They're saying, oh, all these kids are queer now because they're being groomed and we're educating them, blah, 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 blah. No, they just have language and the ability to self-identify now and express themselves, hopefully in a safe way. But having these conversations, all that we're doing is creating more safety for youth
And
in a very general sense.
yeah, and you look at it like, okay, in the 60s it was legal to be gay.
Yeah.
So, and trans and queer. Well, I'm just gonna use blanket queer.
Yeah.
Uh, it was illegal to be queer. You went to jail. Then in the 80s, the HIV/AIDS epidemic happened.
Hmm.
So nobody was coming out because all the folks who were out and having, sex were dying.
Hmm.
And we lost so many people. And then, there was still a stigma around all that until recently. And I mean, there's still stigma around HIV/AIDS, but like,
Even in
eh,
the 90s, gay male teachers were just constantly being accused of being pedophiles. Like it's,
so why would people come out?
yeah.
You had to hide to survive. It was survival. Um, and I look at that and it's similar to um being left-handed.
Mm,
For the longest time, you can be left-handed in school. If you were
I'm
left-handed,
left-handed.
but they would like 50 years ago, they would force you to write with your right hand.
Totally. My second grade teacher would used to tell me she was a very old teacher and she would tap my
And
hand
then
with a ruler and be like, just kidding. But
all of a sudden, they stopped doing that, and miraculously, all these left-handed people emerged. They weren't groomed to be left-handed. They were always left-handed, and they were finally able to be themselves.
yeah,
No different than queer people.
I
If
love this expression because it's so true.
if grooming was real, I'd have a wife and kids right now because I was in the most heteronormative, hypermasculine space that there is. I was
Mhm.
a professional hockey player.
Yeah, everyone's groomed to be straight. And this is actually a really fucking great point because not enough people are talking about this. We groom society to be heterosexual and live a heterosexual, cisgender, normal life. That's how you're groomed. You're groomed by every single piece of media, all of our kids' movies, everything, especially in the 90s. Like there wasn't queer characters in Disney movies in the 90s. Even lions and bugs and everything was still heterosexual, cis male, cis female relationship.
And I always question if they feel that you can be groomed to be queer, does that mean they're actually queer and they're suppressing who they are? Because I'm like, yes, I've been with women. Yes, I adhere to the norms of my culture, but I was gay and I knew I was gay. And there was no grooming me. I didn't know any gay people.
Hmm.
I was gay. So if you think you can be groomed and just change like that, then I question your sexuality or your gender identity because let's be real. And then, I'm so miffed by all of it. It's just ridiculous, the notion that we could be groomed because we have representation for a group that makes up almost 25% of the population. Like, what are we talking about? Like just go live your life and let other people live theirs.
Totally. It's still rampant in racism too. You look at what happened with The Little Mermaid when they cast an African American character there and the pushback that they got. Like, it's wild. But we can look at two lions in a heterosexual relationship in Lion King, and that's totally fine. But if there were two queer lions, all of a sudden all hell would break loose. It just, we're talking about lions. And by the way, there are gay lions, and that's a fact. There are lions that have gay relationships throughout their whole lives, and they're adorable, and I love them. But it's just what we're groomed to do and what we're constantly pushing onto youth is this idea that you can't be different. And different is anything that is not white, cis, heterosexual, normal life. You can't be different because being different is bad or being different isn't represented. And now we're seeing the change of what that means in culture when we have representation, we have education, we have culture that is being allowed for the first time to take space and to teach and allow people in and show them. And there's understanding now of why topics and things are hurtful to a culture and things that have been taken from culture, that it's we finally have a place where everyone is able to have a voice. In a way, we're getting there, but social media was a big help with that. And so now kids are feeling a bit safer. They do know that other people out there are like them. They do know that they have community, and they should be able to find this in sports. And it's one of the last places that is just so unwilling to evolve. And that's why I'm really grateful to what you're doing, because I really loved playing sports, and I ended up having a negative experience with them because at the time when I was 15, I had come out as queer, but I hadn't transitioned yet. So it was the same thing. I was going to be perceived as a gay male in a locker room. So I can understand that rhetoric, but it it is so important to have sports. It's such fundamental building blocks for kids, and every kid should be able to play them.
It's funny going back to like the whole groomer or we're turning people queer, all that. Um, one of the reasons I came out, and I don't really mention this publicly, is because it was pre-apps, like when I first decided to figure out who I was. And I went on a dating website called Gaydar. And on Gaydar, I was living in Europe and I was playing hockey over there. You could see cities across the world. You could go to any city you wanted and search. And I searched my hometown and I saw a lot of closeted men who are married to women. And I went, holy fuck, that's going to be me. And I'm not growing up and I don't know their situations, if their spouse is known. It's frankly none of my business. But I'm growing up in a time where I can be myself. And it'd be incredibly selfish of me to not figure it out.
Well,
Because it's going to impact more than just me. It would impact a wife, it would impact kids, it would impact, you know what I mean? Like it would impact
mhm.
people. And then beyond that, to what you said about, people essentially not conforming or able to be more themselves. I have a saying everywhere I go, and it's that normal doesn't exist. We're all a bunch of weirdos, and that's a beautiful thing. And the more we embrace our weirdness, the less likely we are to judge others for theirs. Yet in men's team sports, we conform so much that, like, listen to any hockey player get interviewed. It's painful. It's the same answers every single time. They dress the same, they talk the same, they walk the same, and it's boring.
Mhm.
So, like, people
Can you
get,
do like an impression of
yeah, pucks in deep, pucks on net, back check hard, yeah, play for the logo on the front, blah blah blah.
that was
My
pretty
ears,
accurate.
my ears bleed every single time. And but if they showed personality, they'd be vilified. Or if they like things outside the sport, they'd be vilified. Like there's a player who's been traded twice, and part of the reason I've heard he's been traded is that instead of going drinking with the boys on road trips, he goes to museums and reads books.
Oh, oh my God, I love him.
But can you imagine? He's essentially the fag.
Oh,
He's othered for that. So if
you can't even be smart.
you can't even have your own personality,
Yeah.
let
Oh,
alone
you're
fag.
intellectual. Yeah, no, that doesn't work with hockey. Like
You know,
what?
so I do a breakout with all the players now, and because people talk about grooming. I'm targeting, like, I'm focused on a straight audience. I assume everyone in the room's straight. And it's not about having them become gay. I don't care if they're gay or not.
Hmm.
Couldn't care less. If they are, or they're gay, or they're bi, or they're trans, or whatever, they'll DM me later and they'll talk to me if they need support. But in that room, I'm assuming everyone's straight. And the intent is to have them realize impact of language, behaviors, attitudes. And if they can recognize that and they're good people, which I believe most of them are, they're going to evolve.
Hmm.
And then I want to pull them out of that conformity. They need to be more of individuals because they all have things they enjoy and they're being taught from young ages that you can only focus on hockey in school.
Hmm.
But, there's an old adage that you can only have two things between a girlfriend, school, and hockey. And it's like, well, by that notion, then nobody should be at the games.
Hmm.
That surgeon who has season tickets shouldn't be going to the games because they should be at home with their family and thinking about surgery.
Hmm.
Like, so the whole notion of it is unrealistic and kind of ridiculous. And we should have 30 things we love, 50 things we love, and we should be able to enjoy them. And even if you are taking the sport as a professional, you still need distractions. If you're just dwelling on sport the whole time or your job, it's not healthy.
Totally. And you don't really, even really, really famous players now, like thinking on that subject, you don't really get to see the well-rounded version of them and things that they like in interviews until
Either
they're
one.
retired. And once they're retired, you look at Beckham, like probably one of, if not the most famous sports player of our generation. He married a Spice Girl, and still it was Beckham soccer, Beckham soccer, Beckham soccer, Beckham soccer. And it wasn't until he took a step back from soccer where you start to see more. He's like cooking now. He's got his family. They're showing like a
Wear long.
more well-rounded version of him and his lifestyle. But you're right. We never see anything really about him unless it's about soccer or coaching or another team or an opinion on soccer until he was out of the sport.
And even that, just for, dating them, marrying a Spice Girl and being a bit of a personality and a celebrity, as opposed to solely an athlete, he was vilified throughout his,
Hmm.
you know.
Hmm.
So I do a breakout now with players, and I'm like, you call yourselves a family, whether it's boys teams, girls teams. I use an analogy like they're family or brothers or sisters. I'm like, tell me something you typically wouldn't tell a teammate you enjoy to do. Because there's only four things you can talk about in a men's locker room: women, video games, partying, and sports. And I'm like, tell me something, music, as long as it's socially accepted music. But tell me something you typically wouldn't tell a teammate you enjoy. And I give them like 5 minutes to think about it because they've never thought about it.
Hmm.
And then they actually start sharing stuff, and it's really fascinating. Like, I had a kid in Calgary say that he loves making candles. And it's
Oh, I
and
love making candles.
a 15-year-old hockey boy, and five of his teammates sell the candles.
Wow.
Yeah. I had a kid in BC tell me that, he likes making music.
Hmm.
Played his music for his teammates after, and the session was done. And we've had stories
Oh,
throughout the country, but they like things, they just have to hide it. And that's really sad because they're not bringing their full selves. And the more you bring
totally.
the
It's not a safe space. And that's not a real community. It's not a real team if it's not a safe
fake,
space.
fake. And if you can't be yourself as a straight white cis dude, good fucking luck being anyone else.
Yeah, 100%.
So if we can break those barriers and allow people to be more individual of an individual while still playing for the team, then all of a sudden, if you bring your weirdness, the stuff you like everywhere you go, and corporate culture's done studies on this, and they found the more that an employee can bring themselves to work, their full selves, the happier they are. And the happier they are, the more productive they are.
Totally. That's
It
just
also
it's fact.
It's facts. And it also fosters a culture where more people can be their full selves.
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden, if that was the case, let's say in hockey, Now all of a sudden, a player who comes from a non-traditional faith in the culture, it's all Christian kids pretty much. Maybe now they can share a little bit about their faith. Maybe now the BIPOC player who might have different customs and traditions than the white kids can share a bit of their culture. Maybe now
Totally.
the LGBTQ plus player can come out. And
Totally.
I think the more we break down that rigid conformity within the culture, the safer it's going to be and the happier everyone will be.
Well, and why not celebrate it? I remember how when like there was a moment where I was in elementary school and we had a new student come in and they brought food from their culture and it was such a beautiful experience for them because they were new, they had been kind of bullied getting there, didn't speak English very well, and then just brought like this gorgeous platter that their mom had made to show the class a bit about their culture and share the food. And it was so well received. And everyone, I mean, it was probably the best kubi day I've ever had in my life, but it was, it changed this view. And then it had them feeling supported and loved for who they were and something that they brought that was different. And then it was being celebrated by the class. It's the similar aspect in all things in life. If we can take the pieces of us that make us different and show them to each other and celebrate each other for those pieces, even if it's not something that we want, even if it's, not a piece of food that you enjoy or whatever, but you can look at them and celebrate them because they enjoy it and it brings them happiness and it makes them feel good. That's a culture and a society where people are being set up for success. I was just on a podcast a little while ago called Brave Women at Work, and the podcast is majority right wing listeners. And I was kind of prepped on that. She said she thought it was an important conversation for me to come on as a female entrepreneur to share my experience as a trans woman in corporate world. Um, and I agreed because I thought it was important, but I was prepped that because a lot of her listener base is right wing conservative, I could get pushback, and she was prepared for pushback as well. But we were talking about corporate world when somebody that's different is celebrated and feels safe, the productivity, the commitment that they make to the company as well is massive. Their expectancy within the company goes from, I think, a 4 to 7 year kind of career plot to 15 to 25 years of commitment to a company where somebody feels celebrated, accepted, and then obviously just paid and given fair opportunity within that company for growth. But people don't feel celebrated in majority of jobs, especially queer people. We don't feel welcome in a lot of spaces. We're not welcome in a lot of spaces. And these conversations around sports are a lot. Even if I go to a hockey game, honestly, Brock, I'm still kind of like I'm fairly confident in my transition and I'm I feel a lot better than when I had first transitioned and was looking more masculine. But even now, I'm still just like going into a hurdle of straight hetero boys that are all rah rah. I'm either sexualized and then get that end of the stick, or if somebody for some reason does peg me, then it's just, oh, she's trans. I'm either overly sexualized in that point of view, or I'm, disgusting because I'm a guy. So it is still a nerve-wracking experience. I'm 7 years into transition, but I think for any queer person going to a sports event, there is still that moment where you're like,
Yeah, and I think we got to do more in sport. Like, I'm tired of Pride nights. I'm tired of rainbow washing everything. Um, like I haven't seen a rainbow eradicate homophobia or transphobia yet.
mhm,
And I want actual and this is why I do what I do, because I'm like, shit doesn't work. Studies
mhm,
have shown it's not changing anything. They're lovely, um, in the sense that, you know, they raise money those nights and then donate it to local charities. I think that's phenomenal. I think the rest of it is incredibly superficial and fake and not actually fostering inclusive environments both in the locker room, because nothing's done there really.
Hmm. Well, there's no conversation being had. It's just like we're wearing
Unless,
rainbows on our jerseys and raising money, but there's no
totally.
conversation.
Unless somebody's bringing, somebody like myself in, then it's like just, nothing's being done there. Nothing's being done to foster that safe space. And then amongst fans, like they need stronger policy and they have to have zero tolerance for harassment and abuse and language and everything else. And it's got to be stronger. And
Totally.
we need to protect people and keep them safe. And we're failing. Instead, we slap rainbows on things once a year. And I just can't get behind it. Like I actually hate it.
I do want to switch gears a tiny bit because there is just one last thing that I wanted to cover with you, which is something that me and you talked briefly about before, which was a relationship that you were in, queer relationships in sports, but this is kind of like a first glance at what it's actually like being a gay male in sports. And you had shared that you were in a relationship. Do you mind just sharing a bit about your experience, the toll that it took on the relationship with you and your partner, and how that kind of evolved?
Yeah, it's pretty cool now to see the difference though, because when I'll share the relationship, but now like I'm with somebody else and we've been together 6 years, living together for five, maybe we've been together seven. I don't know. It's been a while.
Hmm.
And in gay years, that's like 50, like it's a 50 year.
Totally. Congrats.
Yeah, thanks. It's wild. But now like people will be like, do you have a boyfriend? Do you have a husband? Like even in these locker rooms I'm going into, they'll be like, are you two gonna have kids? Like what's all this. Sometimes he's come with me to speaking events at schools and he gets more of a warm welcome from the students than I get. Like it
Oh.
actually pisses me off because like it's supposed to be my thing. And I'll show up, and then at the end, like usually we have a little meet and greet, take some photos. He has a longer line than I do. He calls himself the People's Princess. No, like the first time he came, I was talking to teachers after at a high school, and I look over and he's got like a 50-person lineup for photos. I'm like, what the fuck? Like I'm so angry. And then he's like, Brock, I'm the People's Princess. Like, what do you expect? The next day we had another one and he was sitting there and I was gonna ask, do you have a boyfriend? I'm like, yeah, his name's Matt. He's sitting over there. And I look over and he starts waving like this to all the kids in the school.
I'm not gonna lie, I kind of want to meet your boyfriend.
Oh, he's incredible. You'd love him. You would love him.
Next
I'll
time
send
you
you
two are in Vancouver, we're definitely gonna go out and do
100%.
something.
But so I'll say it is evolving, but I remember like after when I was in Europe, I said, man, you need to figure this out because I was going down a real destructive path. I was self-harming. I was drinking daily. I was depressed. I wasn't sleeping. I went from like being on NHL draft lists and supposed to have this linear trajectory to the NHL to playing in the minors in Europe because I was a train wreck. And I went on that site and saw all these closeted men, and I went, you need to figure this out because two things were going to happen. One, my hockey career was going to end, and two, if I kept going down this path, I was going to end up dead. So I came back from that season. I came to Toronto, and I went on a date with a guy, and we started dating. We dated for 3 years without a soul in my life knowing. Not a friend, not a family member, nobody. And we actually had an alias, a fake name that we would use for me with his friends so that they couldn't find me on social media, figure out as a professional hockey player and potentially, out me and ruin my career. Um, it was heartbreaking. Like looking back was really sad to think that we had to do that. And it took an incredible toll on the relationship. I was paranoid, I was scared, I didn't want to go out, I didn't want to be seen. And he internalized that as it was about him, but it was never about him. It
Mhm.
was um we broke up and right shortly after we did, I ended up coming up to my family and stuff. But um he didn't want to be friends, and I got it. Like it was painful. Like it was my first love, his first love, and it was like how do you be friends with that person who can't have you in their life?
Hmm.
And I, hate what it did to him and what it did to me. But so we broke up and we weren't in each other's lives, and we went 10 years without seeing each other. And then one day, so I did a show for a couple of years with World of Wonder, like RuPaul's Drag Race.
Hmm.
So I was in LA filming the show. And one morning I was walking on Santa Monica, I was going to the gym, and it was like had to be 7 in the morning. And I'm walking across the street on Santa Monica, and in the middle of the intersection, we bump into each other. 10 years have not seen each other. It was like, and we dated in Toronto. He lives in LA now, and I happen to be filming in LA.
Hmm.
And it was like seeing a ghost.
Oh, I bet.
So we walked over to the side, we talked for a minute, and I was like, I'd really like to like grab coffee and catch up. He was married. I don't think his partner was keen on that. Um, but they ended up splitting up, and a year to the day later, during the pandemic, I got a text message saying, I really want to have coffee with you. I hope that we can talk. And now we're actually really good friends.
Oh, I love that.
And I'm so grateful that I have the opportunity to right a wrong that I did in my life.
And I
Uh,
mean, I wouldn't even saying, I understand why you're saying that right or wrong, but I don't think that it's fair to say that in that situation you were necessarily wrong. I'm sure that you were doing the best with what you had in that situation. You know what
fully.
I mean?
Yeah, I was very upfront and I was very clear on where I was at.
Hmm.
So I always try to communicate. I'm a communicator. It's what I do for a living. It's what I do in my, personal life. And I tried, but it just didn't feel right, and it's not the person I am. And to me, it felt like hiding it was survival.
Mm.
But now I look at it and go like, I feel like I wish I had figured out what I figured out now. That I don't need acceptance from anyone. The only one that can accept me is me.
Hmm.
Because acceptance from others creates a hierarchy that they're above you, and that's bullshit. We're all equal.
Totally.
And had I known that then, I would have had the integrity to date him and be open. Um, that said, I was in that bubble. My whole life revolved around hockey, and I was programmed to believe that that's all that mattered.
Totally.
And it was my entire identity. So I didn't know any different. And we're all products of environments.
Hmm.
If you grow up in a house where Fox News is on every day, guess what your viewpoints are going to be. Like,
Totally.
and so my views, my thoughts, my everything came from that environment. And it was painful, but I'm really grateful that we have formed a friendship, and that I, can text him at any point or call him, and I know he'll answer, and vice versa. And he's met my partner, they've had drinks and get along, and it's like it just feels nice to know that, that heartbreaking moment in your life where you lose somebody you love because you can't be yourself, is able to have some sort of a happy ending
Hmm.
where it's like you
Yeah,
just
full circle moment.
exactly, and it all just came together, and it just feels like it's good. It's at peace. There's an ease there now, and that to me is a huge relief.
I'm really grateful that you get that as well. I didn't know if I was going to share anything about this because I went through a situation that was quite stressful for me where I dated somebody that was I'm already getting anxiety talking about it. I'm just gonna be very vague. I dated somebody that played sports and had a bit of a name going, and there was an incident where our relationship had been leaked to something, and then all of a sudden it was going to be a story. And that was probably the scariest thing. And for him, I had the opposite. He was more ready to be like, you know what, fuck it at this point. Like, I don't know, let's just, let's do it. And I didn't want to. I didn't want it to take away from what I was trying to do with. I had just started the foundations of my first business. I was just getting started in social media. I, was building my career, and the last thing that I wanted was to take away anything that I was trying to do and take away my own power, because then all of a sudden it's like, oh, you're the trans girl that's dating this person. And you become like this attachment or this sidekick. And it's not what I wanted. And I also figured that I would have a ton of negative media attention because sports is very conservative. And I wasn't ready for it. I was not in a place where I thought that I would be able to handle it very well. And so me and him ended up splitting up because of that. And we haven't really talked much since, but I know he's now moved on and is married and is having a very successful career. And I'm really grateful. And I wish him absolutely nothing but the best. But it doesn't matter in if you're the person that's dating somebody that's playing, or if you're the player, this the sport or and sports in general are just not safe for queer people, and specifically queer relationships for either of the partners. And it's a problem. It's a problem that we need to fix. And I'm really glad that your experience came to a full circle moment where you got to have that resolution, because it it is sad to think that two people loving each other could be destroyed and completely set back because of a career goal that is played in an area where it's transphobic and homophobic behavior constantly. So,
But I would wonder, because I know for myself, like now I don't give a fuck what anyone thinks of me. I
mhm.
couldn't give two shits what anyone thinks of me anywhere. Like I do things my way. I screw up sometimes. I'm right sometimes. But like it's I don't care. I just don't care about anyone else's thoughts of me. I just live by my moral compass. Um, I wonder if today you would feel more comfortable being in that type of relationship. Like if that was today, if you'd be more like, yeah, I don't give a shit.
I mean, I'm definitely in a more secure place. Like, I'm trying to picture if my partner Cass had decided to go and like join the NBA or something. I it's hard to say. I don't know, because there is a lot of discrimination for whoever the first trans female quote unquote trophy wife is going to be. I feel like it's going to be a deep dive into her life, and it's going to be a lot for whoever that person is. But I don't know. Why do you think more
It,
people aren't coming out in sports? Why do you think, we have a big shift in culture, we have a big shift in media, we have, a big shift in women's culture where there are a lot of openly lesbian players. Why do you think we're still so far behind in men's sports?
the locker room.
Yeah,
I think it's all about the locker room. I think, yeah, that's the place where
because there
they,
are gay NHL players, and I can say this factually because I'm not going to out anybody, but I can sit here and say I know very well that there are gay playing NHL players right now in the industry. So it's not, I think it's fucking ridiculous that people think there's not a single queer person playing sports. Just going to tell you right now, I know personally for a fact that there are queer people playing sports, and they're just not feeling safe enough to come out.
I think it's two things. Number one, they may not want that attention that you're talking about, right? Because now it's like a deep dive. Like the day I came out, I got over 10,000 messages from people all over the world. I did months of like press daily. Like it was a lot.
Mhm.
And then everyone's trauma dumping on you, right? And if you're a hockey player and you've just spent your whole life in that bubble, like before I came out publicly, I was out in my private life for years. And I had gone through the whole baby gay phase. I had figured out what I needed to figure out, and I was in a place where I was secure enough to come out publicly. But if they just came out and they're still like immersed in that bubble, good luck.
Hmm.
Good luck, because now you're afraid for your career that you're going to get blackballed. You are afraid that your teammates are going to hate you or think you're sexualizing them. You've heard all this homo negative stuff daily to beat you down. And then on top of that, now everyone's going to have a magnifying glass on your life.
Hmm.
It's tough. That's why very few athletes come out while they're playing,
Hmm.
especially it's team sports and the big four in particular,
Hmm.
because it's not easy. It's terrifying, and you don't know how it'll impact your career.
Hmm.
Nobody wants to go through that. So,
And it's sad seeing the the turmoil that some of these people are going through because I have friends that are part of communities and I've met through an event or whatever. And so they are having a life and it's less secretive than maybe it would have been 15 or 20 years ago, but it's almost more lock and key now because with social media and press and the way things leak and travel, like you have to be so conscious that your group is not going to do something that it's going to have a negative impact on you. I think that having a group of people that work in media or in press or have a public appearance, they understand a little bit more of the weight that comes with that. But you look at any male sports team, and if you look at the statistics of that 25% of people are queer, 25% of that team could be gay. So we need to be creating a safer environment for them.
and even, like, yeah, it's even if a player, like to your point earlier in the relationship you're in, if a cis man who's a professional athlete is dating a trans woman, they're going to be called gay.
Hmm.
They're going to be called a fag. They're going to be, hit with a ton of slurs.
Totally.
And like, there's an NBA player who has been, you know, like people have speculated that he is attracted to trans women, and everyone thinks he's gay, and it's like, well, no, he's into women. Like, what are you talking about?
Totally. And people
But
don't understand the whole sexuality and gender identity, and they just
oh, they can't even, like, people conflate gender and biology and like so many different things. It's wild. I've had people protest speaking engagements, not this tour, but like bigger ones, like universities and stuff. And like I had one person say to me, like, if things keep going the way they are, there's going to be no men or no women. And I'm like, are you a man? He's like, yeah. I'm like, then there's going to be men. Calm down. It's not
yeah,
that.
relax.
Like, and there's just a lack of critical thinking in society, which leads to all this stuff.
Totally. I think that's such a fucking stupid Republican thing to say. Like, there's not going to be any of us left if you're all turning gay. If you look at, there was just documents. There was artifacts found dating way, way back to like caveman era of human beings. And it showed homosexual cavemen, basically. I don't know. I'm not going to say this very intelligently, so I'm just going to say it. And what would happen was the straight cis men were going out and hunting. The straight cis women that were having children were going out and finding medicine and foraging. And the gay men were protecting the youth. They were staying home and protecting all of the kids. So I think it's kind of funny because the gunkles were sitting there protecting all y'all's babies, and now you're fucking discriminating. So they've always been there. There's nothing that teaches somebody to be gay. There's nothing that grooms them. There's no sort of culture or curtains on the wall that are going to make your kid gay. It's just you're born queer. It's part of who we are, and we need
Innate.
to be celebrating.
It's innate. It's in you.
It's love. You're loving. For me as a trans person, transitioning was loving myself. If you're gay, it's you're loving another person. Like, I hate the fact that we talk so negatively about queer people when all that queer culture is trying to express right now is the fact that it's love. If you're transitioning, you're choosing love for yourself. And if you're in a queer relationship, you're choosing love for your partner. Like, the whole conversation is based around love. And it's the fact that we're trying to discredit people's life away from love, whether that's loving themselves or loving a partner, is fucked up. The world needs more love.
It does. But I think the people who are trying to discredit or push people away don't love themselves.
Totally.
You can't love yourself and then treat other people like that. You just can't. And I used to get really angry on the internet. Now I just look at it and go, oh, they're going through some shit.
Mhm.
I I get a fair amount of hate, and one person was like really attacking me one day, and I just decided to respond, and I said, like, what would make you think it's okay to talk to another human being like this?
Mhm.
And then he paused, and then he responded and he said, I I was sexually assaulted by both my parents.
Wow.
And it doesn't excuse what he's doing at all, but it gave me, it changed my perspective a little bit where I don't have to go back and forth with people. Like, I just, they're going through their own shit. They're projecting their shit onto me. And if I can recognize that, then it
Mhm.
doesn't impact me at all because I don't give a shit what they think. B, you know, it almost like I feel sad for them in a way, like
Of
in a
course. Yeah.
really strange way, like roundabout way. I'm like it's sad that you feel the need to do this, and I kind of, you know, pity them a little bit.
Mhm. Wow. I'm so grateful for what you're doing. I'm so grateful for the conversations that you're having. And I'm really, really grateful to have you on this podcast. Thank you so much for coming on and having this conversation. It's a weird one to have. And there's a lot of light and media around talking about things like this. And I think that you're incredibly, incredibly brave. This is what the Braveyard is all about. But I can't think of championing anybody more than you and what you're trying to do because it's so important.
Thank you, and thank you for your work and being so visible and unapologetically yourself. It matters, and it's helping people whether you know it or not. And thank you for amplifying my work. I truly appreciate it.
Oh, you are such a fucking godsend. I can't wait for you to come to Vancouver and we can finally go out and have some fun.
Let's do it. I'm in.
All right, folks, that wraps up today's episode of The Braveyard. Massive, massive thank you to Brock for coming on and sharing so vulnerably. I have purposely avoided the conversation of LGBTQ2 plus people in sports right now on most of my social media because I lack the education to be able to contribute to the conversation properly. But I had such an amazing time. I learned so much, and I hope that you guys did too. At the end of the day, everyone just wants to participate and fit in and feel welcome to be able to participate in sports. And that's what it's all about, team and community. So hopefully that's the direction that we can move in with it. Next week, we have our season finale with the absolutely stunning, hilarious, authentic, and lovable Chloe Veach. You know her from Too Hot to Handle, The Circle, the latest season of Celebrity X on the Beach, and so much more. I can't wait to share more on that conversation and the season finale next week. But for now, I'm Courtnei Lee, and this is The Braveyard.